Square Enix revealed that their financial report a while back, and almost immediately, everyone who was trying to pretend that Final Fantasy 16 actually did well, that it was actually a success, that people like me were just being hyperbolic and were just exaggerated, were forced to like face the music and forced to admit that this game was not only a bomb, but this is a product that will likely destroy the Final Fantasy brand and by extension Square Enix itself, because people did not want to admit the fact that Square Enix has already had $100 million bomb this year with Forspoken, and now with Final Fantasy 16, the product that they assured their shareholders would turn their ship around and fix everything. With that bombing as well, Square Enix is in a very precarious position. These were not small projects. These games bombing the way they did would end the company like if Grand Theft Auto 6 bombed, right? Like what would Rockstar fall back on? If nobody was buying the microtransactions, if no one was buying the games, like what exactly would keep Rockstar's lights on, right? GTA 5 isn't going to be played forever, right? That game is old and busted. Grand Theft Auto 6, like bombing in this fashion, would destroy the company, destroy the brand, and it would be overtaken by its competitors. And that is exactly what's happened with Final Fantasy. An untouchable icon in the 90s. Final Fantasy was held to the gold standard of gamers for being like the most cutting edge when it came to RPG visuals, to music, to gameplay. Like it was absolute, the absolute peak of JRPG, of the JRPG like dominance, right? Like the 90s, right? We saw lots of great stuff. Like Square Enix established this genre name, and over the past like 3 decades, they've shat all over it, right? Like they told you that like we're not going to make turn-based RPGs anymore. We're not going to make games on Nintendo anymore. We're Square Enix and we can do whatever we want. Like we can get rid of the creator of Final Fantasy. We don't care. We own the license. We own the IP. We could just slap the brand name Final Fantasy onto everything and it'll sell. And over the past several years, especially the past decade, that has become less and less true. Like the Final Fantasy brand has become toxic because of Square Enix's inability to evolve and grow with the times. Like I remember growing up, like anticipating the release of Kingdom Hearts 3. I remember being such a huge fan of Kingdom Hearts that I got into like classic Final Fantasy and classic Disney animation. I got so into Square Enix. I was so invested in like everything. And then like I had to wait a decade for a game that I still to this day have not finished, right? Like Kingdom Hearts 3 was so bad, it was so underwhelming that I lost any real desire to play it. And I do think that's the thing that's happening with a lot of these classic video game franchises is that they no longer have the prestige they used to. They no longer like people no longer go out and buy like Mega Man games just because they exist. Like they have to be something special. Like people don't go out and buy Final Fantasy games just because they exist. They have to be something special. Like Square Enix has not been able to replicate the past successes of old games. Like they have not been able to innovate. They have not been able to grow. They have not been able to like understand the problem with what they're doing. And as a result of that, they have essentially run their company into the ground. So much so that I've said numerous times on this channel that I expect them to be the next Konami. Like I expect them to reach the point where like they just don't produce video games anymore. And I think those days might not be too far off. Like within the next couple of years. Like, isn't it amazing how all these companies that abandoned Nintendo in the '90s are like failing now? It's almost like going with PlayStation was a bad move in the long term, which is something I've been saying for like 20 years at this point. Like, unbelievable, unbelievable that it's finally happening, that we're finally seeing these companies just collapse under their own weight. They really thought they could keep this going forever. They really thought they could just gaslight people into thinking the Final Fantasy brand was still viable, that like action Japanese RPGs were the future, that like this is the direction that people wanted to see them. Like we needed to do this to appeal to the mass argument. We needed to do this to appeal to the mass market. Unbelievable. It was a complete joke. Not enough people called this out for what it was when it was happening. And I hope that more people speak up about the failures of Square Enix going forward. I hope this is seen by the industry at large as the beginning of the end. Like, Square Enix is done, and I will not miss them in the slightest.